bones in there. There's not really anything I'm going to be able to do with those. If you just want to take a look at them, we can do that. But
Okay, let's just go ahead and hand her. She's got the gloves on, so let's hand her. Don't, yeah, just hand her the box. We'll let her. I don't know. I've handled them. Everybody else handled them, but
well, they'll clean it. That's fine. With bones, one of the first things you do is either my training is you want to sand the exterior layer off because you don't want any contaminating DNA from whoever might have touched or handled them.
Well, I think all I've done is taken pictures and sent them to Dr. John McCullough. He's been our anthropologist and DNA expert. He's he shares authorship with me on Finding Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid by Marilyn Grace and Dr. John McCullough. So I took a picture of the bone in the plastic.
Okay.
I think that's the bone there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the bone in the plastic bag.
Okay.
I took a picture of that. We mashed it to a medium-sized human being, and so this one we don't know. This bone we don't know whether it's human or not.
Okay.
Do you have any clue?
I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to.
So how would you extract DNA from that?
So you have to. I mean, there's a number of different ways you can extract bone DNA, but typically we want to kind of grind it into a powder. So I actually worked for Bodie back in the day, and I worked for them during 2001. So after 9/11, we received bone samples from the World Trade Center. So that was when Bodie started kind of perfecting how they were going to extract DNA from bones, because what we found was that the method that we had before would get the bone into kind of like chunks of DNA or chunks of bone, but we found that actually getting the bone into more of a powder or shavings, that created more surface area, better ability to collect DNA. So I don't know if that's going to be the best way for these particular bones. They do look obviously very old. So sometimes you can have, more difficulty with older bones or that have been exposed to the elements, bleached by the sun, things like that. But, it's definitely a possibility of getting DNA from these bones. So
wonderful.
If they're human, I would anticipate that we'd probably be able to get some results from those.
So why don't you go ahead and get the bone out of the plastic bag?
Okay.
Because that's the one that Dr. McCullough, after I sent him a picture, and we put it over the top of a drawing of a medium-sized human being, and he was saying that's the spinal column.
That's spinal column, okay.
My problem is in grinding that up. Can you grind up half and get a DNA sample? Do you have to grind up the whole thing?
These are pretty small bones, so I would think they would try to retain some of it, but usually need about a 2-gram sample. And these are pretty light. So you're going to have to discuss that with the lab, what they think they're going to need.
Right. And what should we go to Bodie Lab? Or what lab? Just any lab that does bones? We don't know.
I would say any lab that has experience, extracting a lot of bone samples. Bodie certainly does.
Well, 9/11, there were a few bones involved.
Yeah. There were 14,000 bones by the time that I left. So yeah.
And it's probably take things one step at a time. And these are things we found at Tom's cabin underneath the cabin. Just some really cool things. I mean, there's just too much evidence that Butch Cassidy was buried up at Tom's cabin. We have journal entries that this lady's grandma wrote in her journal.
Okay.
That she attended the funeral at Tom's cabin. We have 2 young boys, D and J Crosby, who saw the funeral, and a man in a rifle on a horse said, "You guys get the hell out of here." And they, as adults, put the pieces together. They were digging for underneath Tom's cabin with backhoe in 1979 on the Parker Ranch, and they weren't happy. They were threatened, so they quit. So we're following the clues.
Sure.
And these bones were found 2 to 3 feet down where this Steve Crosby pointed to where his cousin showed him where Butch Cassidy was buried.
And the burial site was inside the cabin, but the cabin has
Was
since been
moved over because they were trying to hide that fact. Now, I believe in 1979 they moved the body, and we don't know if these are just something
Okay,
that
I was gonna
was
say,
left over.
I'm surprised that, I mean, you might expect to find more bones than that, but yeah, if a body was moved and those were just kind of the residual bones
Yeah.
that were not
And
collected.
we're following the clues, and we have a divining rod expert who finds graves. So he is willing to come out from Iowa. He's found 76 Mormon graves of
Have
those.
you had cadaver dogs out there?
We have. And they have said there is definitely 100% human remains have been buried underneath Tom's cabin.
Trust those cadaver dogs.
Yeah. They were awesome. Joe
Yeah.
Jennings' team of cadaver dogs.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Susanna Ryan.